You know that moment when someone you trust completely just destroys everything you've worked for? Well, that someone was my own brother, and what he did to me in that boardroom, it changed everything between us forever. My name is Evangeline Thorne, and I've been climbing the corporate ladder at Morrison & Associates for 3 years now. It's one of those sleek Manhattan consulting firms where everyone wears designer suits and drinks overpriced coffee while pretending they're changing the world. The kind of place where your next promotion depends on one brilliant idea. And I thought I had it. The rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our 32nd floor office that Tuesday morning in October. I remember because I was standing there watching the droplets race down the glass when my phone buzzed with a text from my brother Kieran. "Coffee before the big meeting? You nervous, sis?" Kieran worked in our digital marketing division, 2 floors below mine. We'd started at Morrison the same month, him with his MBA from Wharton, me with my strategy background from consulting boot camp and sheer determination. Everyone always said we made a good team. The Thorne siblings, taking on corporate America together. I should have seen the signs. The way he'd been asking too many questions about my presentation. How he'd casually dropped by my office the night before, claiming he just wanted to wish me luck while his eyes kept drifting to my laptop screen. But when you trust someone with your life, you don't question their motives. The presentation I'd been preparing for weeks was my shot at making senior associate. Our client, Meridian Tech, was hemorrhaging market share to competitors, and I'd identified exactly why. Their customer acquisition strategy was completely backwards. Instead of chasing new demographics, they needed to double down on their existing base with a revolutionary retention program I'd designed. I'd run the numbers 17 different ways. I'd tested the concept with focus groups. I'd even built a prototype dashboard that could save them millions. This wasn't just a presentation. It was my ticket to the corner office. "Sure, let's grab coffee," I texted back. "But I'm not nervous. I'm ready." We met at that little cafe on the corner of Park and 47th, the one with the barista who always drew hearts in the foam. Kieran looked sharp in his navy Tom Ford suit, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the rain. At 28, he was 2 years older than me, but people often mistook us for twins. Same sharp green eyes, same stubborn jawline, same competitive streak that had driven us both to excel at everything we touched. "So, big day," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Tell me again how this retention strategy works." I should have said no, should have kept my mouth shut. But this was Kieran, my brother, my best friend, the person who'd helped me practice this presentation until I could recite it in my sleep. So I told him everything. The customer lifetime value calculations, the predictive analytics model, even the specific software recommendations. I watched his eyes light up as I explained how Meridian could increase retention by 43% within 6 months. "Evie, this is genius," he said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "You're going to kill it in there." The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the Churchill Conference Room, the fancy one with the mahogany table and the view of Central Park. All the senior partners would be there, plus the entire Meridian Tech executive team. It was the kind of meeting where careers were made or broken. I spent the morning doing final prep, printing backup copies of my slides, rehearsing my opening lines. My assistant Brooklyn brought me green tea and told me I looked absolutely fierce in my burgundy blazer and pencil skirt. At 1:45, I gathered my materials and headed to the elevator. That's when I got the call. "Evangeline, this is Patricia from Mr. Morrison's office. I'm afraid there's been a scheduling conflict. The Meridian presentation has been moved to the Astor Conference Room on the 28th floor, and it's starting in 5 minutes. My blood went cold. The Astor Room was in the digital marketing section, Kieran's territory. I ran to the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time in my heels, my presentation materials clutched against my chest. By the time I reached the 28th floor, I was breathless, and my heart was pounding like a drum. I could hear voices through the closed conference room door, familiar voices, I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. "As you can see from these projections," someone was saying, "we can increase your customer retention by 43% within 6 months. That voice. Oh God, that voice was Kieran's. My legs nearly gave out. Those were my words, my projections, my months of research and analysis, and he was presenting them as his own work. I fumbled for the door handle with shaking hands, but it was locked. Through the glass panel, I could see the entire room. There was Kieran standing at the head of the table in his perfect suit, gesturing confidently at my slides displayed on the projection screen. There were the Meridian executives, nodding and taking notes. There were the Morrison partners, looking impressed. And there, in the corner, was Patricia from Mr. Morrison's office, who had never called me about any scheduling conflict. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own brother hadn't just stolen my presentation. He'd orchestrated an elaborate deception to make sure I wouldn't be there to stop him. I watched in horror as he clicked through slide after slide of my work, explaining concepts I'd discovered, sharing insights I'd developed through countless late nights and weekend research sessions. He was smooth, confident, charming, everything I would have been if I'd been the one standing there. 20 minutes later, the meeting ended to enthusiastic applause. I saw handshakes, business cards being exchanged, smiles all around. Through the glass, I watched Kieran accept congratulations from senior partner Michael Morrison himself. As people started filing out, I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible. But Kieran saw me. Our eyes met through the glass panel, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Regret? Then it was gone, replaced by that charming smile he'd perfected over the years. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway, straightening his tie. "Evie, there you are. I was looking for you." His voice was casual, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just destroyed 3 years of trust in 20 minutes. "You?" I couldn't even form words. My throat felt like it was closing up. "Listen, I know you're probably confused about what just happened," he said, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "But Morrison pulled me into this last minute. Said they needed someone from digital marketing to present the customer retention angle. I tried to call you, but—" "Stop!" The word came out as a whisper. "Just stop lying." His expression shifted slightly. "Evie, you're being dramatic. This is business. The client loved the presentation. The partners are happy, and honestly, I probably sold it better than you would have. You know how you get when you're nervous." The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. This wasn't just about stolen work. This was about my brother thinking so little of me that he believed I deserved what he'd done. That was my presentation, Kieran. My research. My strategy. Mine. He shrugged. Ideas belong to the company, not individual employees. Besides, we're family. What's mine is yours, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. I turned and walked away before I said something I'd regret, or before I started crying in the middle of the office. But as I waited for the elevator, I heard him call after me. "Don't make this into something it's not, Evie. You'll get your chance." The elevator doors closed, and I finally let the tears fall. 32 floors back to my office. 32 floors to figure out what I was going to do next. Because one thing was crystal clear. My brother had just declared war, and he had no idea who he was fighting. The next morning, I woke up with red eyes and a steel resolve. I'd spent the entire night replaying every moment of that presentation, every casual lie Kieran had told afterward, every dismissive word. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw in my chest, but underneath it was something else, cold, calculating anger. I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. The cleaning crew was just finishing up, their vacuum cleaners humming softly in the distance. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how I was going to handle this. My first stop was my computer. I pulled up every email, every draft, every research document related to the Meridian project. The digital trail was extensive and damning. timestamps, version histories, my name on every single file. I'd been meticulous in my documentation, a habit I'd developed during my consulting days. Thank God for that obsessive attention to detail. I screenshotted everything. Email chains showing my initial research requests. Calendar entries for my focus group sessions. Budget approvals I'd requested for the prototype dashboard. Even the coffee shop receipt from 3 weeks ago when I'd first sketched out the retention model on a napkin during my lunch break. By 7:30, I had a folder with 47 pieces of evidence. 47 ways to prove that the presentation Kieran had given was entirely my work. But I needed more than just proof. I needed to understand exactly how he'd pulled this off. I started with Patricia, Morrison's assistant. At 8 a.m. sharp, I knocked on her office door with 2 cups of her favorite lavender latte from the cafe downstairs. "Oh, Evangeline! How thoughtful," she said, accepting the coffee with a smile. Patricia was in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of institutional knowledge that made her more powerful than half the partners. "I was just thinking about you yesterday. Wasn't there some mix-up with your meeting time?" "That's actually what I wanted to ask you about," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I got a call saying the Meridian presentation had been moved, but when I went to the new location, it was already in progress." Patricia frowned, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against her coffee cup. "That's strange. I didn't make any calls about schedule changes yesterday. Are you sure it was me?" My heart started beating faster. "The person said they were calling from Mr. Morrison's office." "Well, I'm the only one who makes those kinds of calls, and I definitely didn't contact you." She pulled up her computer screen, scrolling through her call log. "In fact, according to my records, the meeting was always scheduled for the Astor Room. Has been since last Friday. Last Friday, 3 days before the presentation. 3 days during which I'd been preparing for a meeting in the Churchill Room while Kieran knew the real location." "Patricia," I said carefully, "who requested the room change?" She clicked through several screens before finding what she was looking for. "It was, oh, this is interesting. It was requested by Kieran Thorne. He said there was a conflict with the AV equipment in Churchill and that digital marketing needed to use their specialized setup for the presentation. The AV equipment excuse was clever. Kieran knew our technical team was having issues with the projection system in Churchill because I'd complained about it to him over dinner the week before. I thanked Patricia and headed back to my office, my mind racing. Kieran hadn't just stolen my presentation. He'd spent days setting up the perfect conditions to present it himself, while ensuring I'd be nowhere nearby to expose him. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Brooklyn, my assistant. She knocked on my door around 10 a.m. with a confused expression on her face. "Evie, I have a weird question. Yesterday morning, your brother stopped by while you were in your coffee meeting. He said you'd asked him to print some backup copies of your presentation materials." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "Well, I thought it was sweet that you two were working together, so I gave him access to your shared drive folder. He said he wanted to make sure everything was formatted correctly for the big screen in—" She paused, checking her notes. "The Astor conference room, which seemed odd because I thought your meeting was in Churchill." Another piece clicked into place. Kieran hadn't just stolen my presentation. He'd literally accessed my files, copied them, and reformatted them with his name in the header. Brooklyn, being helpful and trusting, had given him everything he needed. "Brooklyn," I said gently, "in the future, please check with me before giving anyone access to my files, even family members." She looked mortified. "Oh God, did I mess something up? I'm so sorry, I just thought—" "It's okay," I assured her, though it definitely wasn't. "You couldn't have known." But the evidence was mounting. Kieran's deception had been planned, calculated, and executed with surgical precision. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision or a misunderstanding. This was corporate espionage, and he'd used our family relationship as his weapon. I needed to see the presentation he'd actually given. If he'd simply copied my slides, there would be metadata evidence, formatting artifacts, maybe even forgotten references to my original research. but getting access to his version wouldn't be easy. That's when I remembered Derek Matsumoto from IT. Derek and I had worked together on several client projects, and he'd always been helpful when I needed technical support. More importantly, Derek was notorious for being rule-oriented and absolutely hated when people violated company policies. I found him in the server room, surrounded by blinking lights and humming machines. Derek was tall and lean, with thick-rimmed glasses and the kind of focused intensity that made him brilliant at his job. "Hey, Derek," I said, poking my head through the doorway. "Got a minute for a quick consultation?" He looked up from the server rack he was working on, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Evangeline, always. What's going on?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm trying to track down some presentation files from yesterday's Meridian meeting. There might be some intellectual property concerns, and I need to verify the original source of certain materials." Derek's expression immediately became serious. IP violations were his kryptonite. "What kind of concerns?" "Potentially unauthorized use of proprietary research and analysis. I have documented evidence of original authorship, but I need to compare it against what was actually presented to verify there was no borrowing." "That's a serious accusation," Derek said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Who presented the materials in question?" I hesitated for just a moment. "Kieran Thorne." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "Your brother? Wow. Okay, that's complicated. But if there's a genuine IP concern, I need to investigate. Company policy is very clear about proprietary work." 20 minutes later, Derek had pulled up Kieran's presentation files, complete with creation timestamps, edit history, and metadata. What we found was even worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Kieran copied my slides directly, but he'd been sloppy about covering his tracks. The metadata clearly showed that the original files had been created on my computer under my user account weeks before his version existed. He'd literally done a copy-paste job, changing only the title slide to include his name. But the smoking gun was in the speaker notes. I always included detailed talking points in the notes section of my slides, personal reminders and key phrases that helped me stay on track during presentations. Kieran had kept all of those notes, including one that read, "Remember to mention the late nights in the office working on this. Personal touch always helps with buy-in." He'd presented my work, using my research, following my script, even referencing my personal experiences. And the entire senior leadership team had believed it was his brilliant strategy. "This is pretty clear-cut," Derek said, his voice tight with disapproval. "These files show obvious unauthorized copying and misrepresentation of authorship. I'm going to have to file an incident report." "Derek, wait," I said quickly. "I appreciate your thoroughness, but I'd like to handle this internally first. Family dynamics, you know? Can you just document everything and hold off on the official report for now?" He looked conflicted, but eventually nodded. "I'll give you 48 hours. But Evangeline, this is serious stuff. If it were anyone else, I'd have already escalated to HR and the legal department." I thanked Derek and headed back to my office with printouts of all the metadata evidence. Combined with my original files, Patricia's testimony about the fake phone call, and Brooklyn's account of Kieran accessing my materials, I had an airtight case, but I still wasn't ready to make my move. There was one more thing I needed to do. That evening, I waited until the office was mostly empty before heading down to Kieran's floor. His office was dark, but his computer was still logged in, a security violation that would have made Derek's eye twitch. I slipped inside and quickly forwarded myself every email Kieran had sent about the Meridian project. What I found in his sent folder made my blood boil all over again. There was an email to Michael Morrison from 3 days before the presentation. I've been working on some innovative retention strategies for Meridian that I think could really set us apart. Would love the opportunity to present my research to the team. An email to the Meridian executives. Looking forward to sharing some breakthrough analysis my team and I have developed specifically for your market challenges. And worst of all, an email to our department head. Evangeline has been helpful with some of the preliminary research, But I think the strategic vision really needs to come from someone with more client-facing experience. He hadn't just stolen my work. He'd actively undermined me to our superiors while positioning himself as the brilliant strategist who'd graciously allowed his little sister to help with basic research. I forwarded every single email to my personal account, then deleted the forwarding records from his system. By the time I left his office, I had enough evidence to bury him professionally, but I still wasn't ready to pull the trigger, because I'd learned something important about my brother over the past 24 hours. He was capable of calculated deception, professional sabotage, and casual cruelty, which meant whatever I did next had to be absolutely perfect. Kieran had taught me that family loyalty was a one-way street. Now it was time to teach him about consequences. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a plan that would have made Machiavelli proud. Kieran had played dirty, using our family bond as a weapon against me, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated exactly how smart and resourceful his little sister could be when properly motivated. I spent the morning setting up what I like to think of as the Kieran Thorne Memorial Professional Destruction Project. It would take precision, timing, and a level of strategic thinking that would make my stolen presentation look like child's play. First, I needed to let Kieran dig his own grave a little deeper. At lunch, I texted him, "Coffee? I think we should talk about what happened." He responded within minutes. "Of course. Let's clear the air. Same place as Tuesday?" Perfect. He thought he was about to smooth things over with his guilty conscience and my family loyalty. He had no idea he was walking into an interrogation. I arrived at the cafe first, choosing a corner booth where I could discreetly record our conversation on my phone. When Kieran walked in, he looked confident, relaxed, almost smug. He slid into the seat across from me with that charming smile that had apparently fooled everyone, including me, for years. "I'm glad you reached out," he said, signaling the barista. "I was worried you were taking Tuesday's thing too personally." "Tuesday's thing?" I kept my voice level, curious. "You mean when you stole my presentation and presented it as your own work?" His smile faltered slightly. "Come on, Evie. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? We both work for the same company. These ideas, they belong to Morrison and Associates, not to individual employees." "Interesting perspective," I said, taking a sip of my latte. "So when you emailed Michael Morrison 3 days before the presentation, telling him about your innovative retention strategies, you were actually referring to company property?" I watched his face carefully. There it was, a flicker of surprise, quickly masked. He hadn't expected me to know about that email. Well, yes, essentially. Look, the important thing is that the client was impressed and the company looks good. Isn't that what matters? And when you told the department head that I'd been helpful with preliminary research, but that the strategic vision needed to come from someone with more experience, were you protecting company interests then too? Now he looked genuinely uncomfortable. His coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "How did you?" "Evie, I think you're misunderstanding the context of those conversations." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you spent weeks planning to steal my work, manipulate the meeting logistics to exclude me, and then take credit for months of my research, while simultaneously undermining my reputation with our superiors." Kieran set down his cup and leaned forward, his expression shifting from charming to serious. "Okay, let's be honest here. You're talented, Evie, but you don't have the presentation skills or the client relationship experience to handle something this big. I did you a favor by taking it over." "A favor?" I almost laughed. "By lying to Patricia about AV equipment problems? By having Brooklyn give you access to my files under false pretenses? By making me look incompetent to people whose opinions matter for my career advancement?" His jaw tightened. "You're being paranoid, and honestly, a little ungrateful. Do you have any idea how good this makes our family look? The Thorne siblings working together, delivering results for major clients?" There it was, the justification I'd been waiting for. Not only did he not feel guilty about what he'd done, he expected me to be grateful for it. "So this was all for my benefit?" I asked sweetly. "For both our benefits," he said, relaxing slightly. Look, I know you're upset and I get it. But sometimes the person who deserves credit isn't the same as the person who can best deliver results. I presented your research beautifully, didn't I? The client loved it. Everyone won. Everyone except me. You'll get your chance, he said dismissively. There will be other presentations, other opportunities. But right now, while you're still developing your executive presence, it makes sense for me to handle the high-stakes client interactions. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his point. You know what, Kieran? You're absolutely right. His shoulders relaxed. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Completely reasonable, I agreed. In fact, I think you should take credit for more of my work. Really establish yourself as the strategic thinker in the family. He looked pleased, but slightly suspicious. What do you mean? Well, I've been working on a follow-up analysis for Meridian. Some additional retention strategies that could increase their success rate even further. Since you did such a great job presenting the first part, maybe you should handle this one too. His eyes lit up with interest. What kind of additional strategies? Hook, line, and sinker. I spent the next 20 minutes feeding him carefully crafted false information. Fake research conclusions, imaginary case studies, completely fabricated statistics that sounded impressive but were actually impossible to implement. I watched him take mental notes, his excitement growing as he imagined presenting another brilliant, original strategy to the Meridian team. This is fantastic work, Evie, he said when I finished. Really innovative thinking. When will you have the full analysis ready? I should have everything compiled by Monday, I lied smoothly. I'll put it in our shared project folder so you can review it. Perfect. I'll set up a follow-up meeting with Meridian for next week. This could be exactly what we need to secure the long-term contract. After he left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, making sure my phone had captured every word of our conversation. Kieran had just confessed to stealing my work, justified it as being for my own good, and eagerly agreed to steal more. Better yet, he was now planning to present completely false information to a major client, which would expose him as either incompetent or fraudulent when the strategies inevitably failed. But I wasn't done yet. Phase 2 required a different kind of precision. Back at the office, I spent the afternoon crafting what would become known in my mind as the email chain of professional doom. It started with a message to myself, time-stamped weeks before Kieran's presentation, outlining my initial research approach for the Meridian project. Then came a series of follow-up emails documenting my progress, my discoveries, my late-night breakthroughs. Each email was meticulously detailed, showing the evolution of my thinking, the development of my strategies, the refinement of my analysis. I included screenshots of my research, copies of my calculations, even photos of my handwritten notes from various brainstorming sessions. The final email in the chain was sent to Kieran himself, dated 2 days before his presentation. Hey Kay, thanks for letting me run through my Meridian retention strategy with you over coffee. I'm so nervous about presenting this to the senior team, but your feedback really helped me refine the key points. Wish me luck. His response, sent from his actual email account that same day, was even more perfect. You've got this, sis. That retention analysis is brilliant work. I know you're going to kill it in that presentation. So proud of you for developing such innovative strategies. I'd created a digital paper trail that told the complete story. My original research, my strategic development, my nervous preparation for the presentation, and my brother's apparent support and encouragement, right up until the moment he betrayed me. But the crown jewel of my evidence collection came from an unexpected source. Derek from IT called me late that afternoon with an update that made my day. Evangeline, I've been reviewing those files we discussed, and I found something interesting. Your brother's presentation wasn't just copied from your work. He also accessed the Meridian client portal using your login credentials. My heart skipped a beat. He what? Yeah, I was checking the server logs and noticed some unusual access patterns. Someone logged into the client portal from his workstation using your username and password. That's a serious security violation, potentially illegal depending on what information was accessed. This was better than I'd hoped. Not only had Kieran stolen my work, but he'd also committed what amounted to corporate espionage by illegally accessing confidential client information under my identity. Derek, I need you to document everything, every login, every file access, every timestamp. Can you do that without filing the incident report yet? Already done, he said. But Evangeline, this is really serious stuff. Identity theft, unauthorized access to confidential information, potential breach of client privacy agreements. Your brother could be facing termination and possibly criminal charges. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. I understand. Thank you for being so thorough. Friday afternoon, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I created a comprehensive dossier containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered, the original email chain showing my work development, the metadata proving Kieran's copying, the security logs showing his illegal access to client information, the audio recording of his confession, and Derek's technical analysis of the file theft. But I didn't just want to destroy Kieran professionally. I wanted to do it in the most public, humiliating way possible. He'd embarrassed me in front of the entire senior leadership team. Now it was his turn. I scheduled an email to be sent Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, when everyone would be checking their inbox with their first cup of coffee. The recipient list included every senior partner at Morrison & Associates, the entire Meridian Tech executive team, our HR director, the legal department, and about 40 other colleagues who'd witnessed Kieran's stolen moment of glory. The subject line was simple: clarification regarding authorship of Meridian Retention Strategy presentation. The email itself was a masterpiece of professional passive aggression. I laid out the facts clearly and objectively, included irrefutable evidence, and maintained a tone of confused disappointment rather than outright accusation. I expressed concern about potential misunderstandings and procedural irregularities, while making it absolutely clear that Kieran had committed theft, fraud, and multiple policy violations. I ended with a request for a formal review of the situation to ensure that proper credit is given where due and that our company's reputation for integrity remains intact. The beauty of the email was that it didn't require anyone to take my word for anything. The evidence spoke for itself: timestamps, metadata, security logs, recorded confessions, witness statements. By the time people finished reading through the attachments, there would be no doubt about what had happened or who was responsible. But the real genius was in the timing. Monday morning would give Kieran the entire weekend to stew in his overconfidence, probably planning his next stolen presentation, maybe even bragging to friends about his brilliant career moves. He'd walk into the office Monday morning expecting another week of basking in his undeserved success. Instead, he'd discover that his professional reputation had been systematically dismantled and distributed to everyone who mattered in his career. As I finalized the email and set the send timer, I thought about Kieran's words from our coffee meeting. Sometimes the person who deserves credit isn't the same as the person who can best deliver results. He was about to learn that sometimes the person who delivers the best results is the one who's been underestimated, betrayed, and pushed too far. Game over, big brother. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that made Manhattan feel electric with possibility. I woke up at 5:30, not because my alarm went off, but because I was too excited to sleep. Today was the day Kieran Thorne learned that actions have consequences. I took extra care getting ready, choosing my most professional navy suit and my lucky red heels. If I was going to watch my brother's career implode, I wanted to look absolutely impeccable while it happened. I arrived at the office at 7:30, grabbing my usual green tea and settling in to watch my carefully orchestrated chaos unfold. My scheduled email would go out at 9 a.m. sharp, giving everyone exactly 30 minutes into their workday to absorb the full scope of Kieran's deception. At 8:45, I positioned myself at my desk with a clear view of the elevator bank. I wanted to see Kieran's face when he realized his world was falling apart. He arrived at 8:52, looking confident and relaxed in his charcoal suit. I watched him stride through the lobby, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, probably thinking about how he was going to present his next stolen strategy to the Meridian team. At exactly 9 a.m., my computer chimed softly. Email sent. I counted to 60, then opened my inbox to watch the responses roll in. The first reply came from Michael Morrison himself, sent to the entire recipient list. I'm calling an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. in the Churchill conference room. All parties mentioned in this email are required to attend. This is a serious matter that requires immediate attention. Within minutes, my inbox was flooded with responses. Derek from IT confirming his technical findings. Patricia corroborating the fake phone call story. Brooklyn apologizing profusely for unknowingly facilitating the file theft. Even colleagues I'd never worked with were expressing shock and disappointment about the situation. But the most satisfying response came from Meridian Tech's CEO, Rebecca Castellanos. Miss Thorne, thank you for bringing this situation to our attention. We take intellectual property violations very seriously and will be conducting our own review of this matter. We're particularly concerned about the unauthorized access to our confidential information. I glanced toward the elevator at 9:07 and saw Kieran stepping off, coffee in hand, completely oblivious to the digital apocalypse that had just been unleashed in his name. He was actually whistling. I watched him walk to his office, probably planning to check his email, and there it was. Even from 32 floors away, I could see the exact moment he opened his inbox. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His shoulders went rigid. His face, visible through his office window, went completely white. My phone rang. Evie? His voice was tight, panicked. What the hell did you do? I clarified some misunderstandings about authorship and intellectual property, I said calmly. You know, the kind of procedural irregularities that can damage a company's reputation for integrity. You sent that email to everyone, to the clients, to Morrison. I felt it was important that all stakeholders had access to the same factual information, I replied, using the same professional tone I'd perfected for client presentations. Transparency is so important in maintaining trust relationships, don't you think? Evie, you have to fix this. You have to send a retraction or explain that there was some kind of misunderstanding. But there wasn't a misunderstanding, Kieran. You stole my work, lied to multiple people to cover your tracks, illegally accessed confidential client information, and then confessed to it all while expressing no remorse whatsoever. Those are facts, not misunderstandings. You recorded our conversation? I documented our discussion, yes, just like you documented your theft of my intellectual property in dozens of emails and computer files. Funny how digital evidence works, isn't it? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, desperate. Evie, please. I'm your brother. We're family. You can't destroy my career over this. I didn't destroy anything, I said softly. You did that all by yourself when you decided that betraying your sister was an acceptable career strategy. I hung up and watched through his window as he frantically started making phone calls, probably trying to do damage control, but it was far too late for that. The truth was already spreading through the office like wildfire. At 9:30, I saw HR Director Linda Vasquez step off the elevator, her expression grim. She walked straight to Kieran's office and I watched their brief conversation through the glass. Even from a distance, I could see him gesturing frantically, trying to explain himself. Linda's face remained impassive throughout. At 9:45, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Rebecca Castellanos from Meridian Tech. Could you please call me at your earliest convenience? We'd like to discuss the authentic version of your retention strategy. I smiled and saved the number. My stolen presentation was about to become my biggest career breakthrough. At 9:58, I gathered my materials and headed to the Churchill conference room. The same room where I should have been presenting my work a week ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. The scene in Churchill was electric with tension. Michael Morrison sat at the head of the mahogany table, his silver hair perfectly styled but his expression thunderous. To his right sat Linda from HR, flanked by two people I recognized from the legal department. Derek from IT was there with his laptop and a stack of printed evidence. Patricia sat near the window, looking uncomfortable but determined. And there, at the far end of the table, was Kieran. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. His perfect suit was wrinkled, his usually immaculate hair disheveled from running his hands through it. When I walked in, he looked up with eyes that were equal parts pleading and defeated. "Miss Thorne," Morrison said as I took my seat, "thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. I've reviewed your documentation and frankly, I'm appalled by what I've discovered." He turned to Kieran, his voice cold with professional disappointment. "Mr. Thorne, in my 30 years with this company, I have never encountered such a blatant case of intellectual property theft, fraud, and security violations. Your actions haven't just damaged your own reputation, they've put this entire firm at risk." Kieran opened his mouth to speak, but Morrison held up a hand. "The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. You accessed confidential client information using stolen credentials. You appropriated proprietary research and analysis developed by another employee. You misrepresented your role in the project development to both internal and external stakeholders. And when confronted about these violations, you showed no remorse and actually defended your actions." Linda leaned forward. "Mr. Thorne, you're being terminated immediately for cause. Security will escort you from the building as soon as this meeting concludes. Your access to all company systems has already been revoked." The legal representative spoke next. "We're also recommending that Meridian Tech pursue criminal charges for the unauthorized access to their confidential information. That's a federal crime, Mr. Thorne." I watched Kieran's face crumble as the full scope of his situation became clear. This wasn't just about losing his job. His entire career was over. In today's connected business world, word of his theft and fraud would follow him everywhere. No reputable company would ever hire him again. "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I've learned from it, and I'll never—" "The time for apologies was before you decided to commit fraud," Morrison said sharply. "Or perhaps when you were given multiple opportunities to come clean about what you'd done. Instead, you doubled down on your deception and showed complete disregard for professional ethics." Morrison turned to me. "Miss Thorne, your professionalism throughout this ordeal has been exemplary. You could have handled this situation emotionally or vindictively, but instead you documented everything properly and brought it through appropriate channels. That shows the kind of integrity and strategic thinking we value at this firm." He paused, consulting his notes. "I've also spoken with Rebecca Castellanos at Meridian Tech. They're extremely impressed with your original analysis and want to work directly with you on implementing your retention strategies. Congratulations! You're being promoted to senior associate, effective immediately, and you'll be the lead consultant on the Meridian account. The promotion I'd been working toward for 3 years, finally mine. But instead of the joy I'd expected to feel, there was just a hollow satisfaction. Winning felt different when the victory came, at the cost of destroying someone you'd once loved. As security escorted Kieran from the building, he caught my eye one last time. There was no anger there anymore, just a profound sadness and what looked like genuine regret. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the casual cruelty in his voice when he'd told me I should be grateful for his betrayal. The dismissive way he'd suggested I lacked the skills to present my own work. The weeks of careful planning that had gone into stealing not just my presentation, but my reputation and career prospects. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are exactly what someone deserves. Over the next few weeks, word of Kieran's downfall spread through the Manhattan consulting world. I heard through the grapevine that no major firm would even interview him. he'd become a cautionary tale about professional ethics and the dangers of betraying trust. Meanwhile, my career flourished. The Meridian Retention Strategy became a case study in innovative client solutions. Rebecca Castellanos recommended me to 3 other companies, leading to new contracts worth millions. By Christmas, I was being courted by headhunters from top-tier firms, but the personal cost was significant. My parents were devastated by what had happened between their children. Family dinners became tense affairs where Kieran's empty chair dominated every conversation. My mother kept asking if there wasn't some way to work things out between us, as if professional fraud was just a sibling squabble that could be resolved with apologies. I tried to explain that this wasn't about family dynamics, it was about fundamental character. Someone who could betray their own sister with such calculated precision wasn't someone who could be trusted with anything important ever again. 6 months later, I got a letter from Kieran. He was working at a small regional firm in Phoenix, making a fraction of his former salary. The letter was full of apologies, self-reflection, and promises to rebuild his character. He acknowledged that what he'd done was wrong and asked if we could ever find a way back to being family. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once shattered, can't be repaired. But as I sat in my new corner office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I realized I'd learned something valuable from the whole ordeal. I discovered that I was capable of strategic thinking and calculated precision that I'd never known I possessed. That when pushed to my limit, I could be absolutely ruthless in protecting what was mine. Kieran had tried to teach me that family loyalty was weakness, that trust was something to be exploited, that success came from taking credit for other people's work. Instead, he'd taught me that I was stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined, including myself. The corporate world is full of people who think they can succeed by stepping on others, by taking shortcuts, by betraying trust when it's convenient. They see kindness as weakness and loyalty as something to be exploited. But sometimes, just sometimes, they pick the wrong target. Sometimes they underestimate exactly who they are dealing with. And sometimes they learn too late that the quiet ones, the trustworthy ones, the family members who would never hurt you, sometimes those are the people you should fear most, because when we finally decide to fight back, we don't just win, we obliterate. My name is Evangeline Thorne, and I turned my brother's betrayal into the foundation of my success. I took his attempt to destroy my career and used it to build something even better. And honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because some lessons are worth teaching, no matter the cost, and some justice is worth waiting for, no matter how long it takes.